When you get like 10 or 20 or 30 times the amount of binding to these androgen receptors that you would have otherwise, this is when the heart is going to get huge. If you look at someone like Dallas McCarver, on his autopsy report, his heart was like 3 times bigger than normal. Alrighty, let's do this. Yeah. Hey guys, Fitness Science here. Now, there have been a lot of bodybuilding deaths related to heart disease over the past 10 years. But why do steroids have such a big impact on heart health, and why do guys on gear cycling put their heart at increased risk? The key is the left ventricle in most cases, and something called left ventricular hypertrophy. And growth of the left ventricle usually causes a lot of problems, but why? So basically the heart becomes stiff. Now, when you are training, the heart grows just like any other muscle, but the left ventricle grows as well, and that left ventricle starts to encroach into the chamber of the heart. In a healthy heart, this chamber, the left ventricle, is a chamber in which oxygenated blood leaves the heart to be circulated around the body. But in bodybuilders who have a significant growth of their left ventricle, this chamber space is decreased. Basically meaning that the heart can't get as much blood out because not as much blood can enter the chamber. And you see this on a lot of pictures of left ventricular hypertrophy. The chamber becomes very, very small and the heart can't get much blood out into circulation, and it becomes like a vicious cycle because it will just start beating harder because it can't get enough blood out, but that will in turn cause more growth, and it's like a vicious cycle that just keeps continuing. Now, why is this an issue for bodybuilders? Because when they train, they're using a lot of exogenous anabolic steroids, and this directly increases muscle mass, but the heart also has androgen receptors, and this grows as well. And it's not only the muscle mass, but it also impacts the electrical conductance of the heart. In a normal heart, the electrical conductance travels throughout the heart muscle itself, causing our heart to beat. But if the left ventricle is really thick, the amount of electrical conductance that needs to travel through the muscle is increased, and the amount of muscle mass undergoing depolarization is huge, and the voltage on someone with a really thick left ventricle is a lot higher than a normal heart. You can see this on an ECG printout of someone with left ventricular hypertrophy because the ECG spike is absolutely huge. Now, just a little detour here. A lot of strength trained athletes who are actually natural do have a thick or thicker left ventricle than, say, someone who's never done strength training in their life. And the reason for this is kind of complicated, but it's to do with something called pressure overload. So when you're training with heavy weight during, like, say, weightlifting or powerlifting, blood pressure increases because the resistance is a lot higher. So the heart needs to push against a very high resistance. Say you're at the bottom of a very heavy squat, the heart is working really hard to try and get blood out into the circulation. So the pressure that the heart needs to push against is a lot higher than, say, if you're just sleeping. And what can the heart do? It can't just be like, oh, fuck it, I give up, because then we die. So what it does in turn is increase the force of contraction. So it contracts harder to try and get this blood out into circulation, because at the bottom of a heavy squat, you need all the blood you can get, and the heart needs to supply that blood. So it's going to work harder and contract harder to get that out. Now, what happens when you contract a muscle harder? Well, it's basically what we're doing in training. We're training the heart to beat harder. We're actually going to increase the muscle hypertrophy and thicken the heart like any other muscle in the body, and it will respond by growing. Now, there's usually no issue here. It's actually called an athlete's heart and is actually kind of normal in the research. Now, there's not much issue with someone who's strength trained and has a thicker left ventricle. It just means that they've gone through that process and the heart has responded or adapted to be thicker. The issue is when we have bodybuilders who are huge and who are taking a lot of exogenous anabolic steroids. Just like any other muscle, the heart has androgen receptors and responds to these growth stimuli and will grow maybe 2 or 3 times the rate than these natural athletes. When you get like 10 or 20 or 30 times the amount of binding to these androgen receptors that you would have otherwise, this is when the heart is going to get huge. If you look at someone like Dallas McCarver, on his autopsy report, his heart was like 3 times bigger than normal. The actual organ was like 3 times heavier than normal because he had so many androgens binding to the receptors in the heart and growing it in kind. But the issue is, what I'm trying to get across in this video is, when it is this thick, you are more prone to electrical disturbances, because basically, like, the electrical current going through the heart has just so much more muscle mass to penetrate through. And in the research, having a thicker heart predisposes you to electrical disturbances. That's really bad, because once you get an electrical disturbance in the heart, you're basically opening yourself up to serious heart rhythm issues and heart arrhythmias, where the heart is not going to beat in its normal sinus rhythm, a nice lub-dub sound sinus rhythm. No, you're predisposing yourself to risks where it falls out of that rhythm and you get stuff like sudden cardiac death or ventricular tachycardia, where the heart just loses control of its usual regular contraction and relaxation cycle. The other issue, of course, is that heavy amounts of drug use significantly crashes cholesterol levels. HDL is significantly reduced and LDL is significantly increased, meaning that you are much more likely to have plaque buildup. Now, Dallas McCarver was mid-20s. I think he was 26 or 27 when he died. He should not, barring any like severe genetic abnormalities, he should not have had the amount of plaque buildup he had. He had significant, like really significant coronary artery plaque in his coronary arteries surrounding his heart. That is not normal for a 27-year-old to have these significant deposits of fatty plaque in his arteries. Pretty much he died of a heart attack. He died of a heart attack. This is not normal. This should not be happening at 27 years old. And it's because his heavy drug use significantly crashed his cholesterol or his good cholesterol levels and increased his fatty acids and his bad LDL cholesterol levels. So basically, overall, the danger of steroids is that you increase the actual weight of your heart and you change its actual structure. And also you're affecting the blood. So you're significantly increasing LDL levels, which leads to plaque buildup in the arteries. And basically making the blood thicker and the heart more stiff is really, really not good. And that is a recipe for having heart disease, something go wrong with the heart like sudden cardiac death, or pretty much having a heart attack and dropping on the floor dead. So is it all bad news and doom and gloom? No. If you're a bodybuilder living this lifestyle, there are active ways you can protect yourself from dying young. Let's be real, bodybuilding is about drugs, and the heavy use of drugs at the top level doesn't mean just doing it and not taking any responsibility for your health. You have a responsibility, I would argue, to look after your health as well. So here are the things you need to do if you're a top level bodybuilder or you're just someone getting into bodybuilding that wants to keep yourself safe, even if you're a natural athlete. I would recommend a yearly ECG, echocardiogram, to make sure that your heart is functioning well and you don't have a thicker heart than normal, and that generally it's structurally sound and it's beating well, all the above. ECG, number one. Number two, not to have a heart attack, is checking your blood work. Make sure you know where your cholesterol levels are, where your LPA is. LPA is one of the primary LDL type molecules that is heavily involved in the research in heart disease and heart attack. Know where this is, know where this level is, and ensure that you have this under control. C-reactive protein is another one to ensure that your heart inflammation is not getting too high. And then complete blood work on all your other organs, kidneys, liver, thyroid, complete blood counts. And if you're more interested in the actual blood work to get and the specific markers to get on your blood test, have a look at this video where I go into what blood work to get if you're on cycle or on testosterone replacement therapy. And finally, and most importantly, is actual organ imaging. But not just the ECG, but getting a scan of your heart, coronary artery calcium score. Can't get this very often due to the radiation involved, but getting that done probably every 5 to 10 years is really important, because that directly shows exactly how much plaque is in your arteries. Staying healthy in this industry is pretty much not dying of a heart attack. So that's number 3. Number 4 is blood pressure. This is probably the most important. So many of my guys working with me while on cycle don't know where their blood pressure is, or haven't even heard of blood pressure. It is so important. There is significant evidence that it is an exponential relationship between heart disease, stroke, and heart attack, and your blood pressure. Reducing the stress on your heart, if it is high, through medications like telmisartan and angiotensin receptor blocker, it's so easy to do that, but we need to know where your blood pressure is. And guys who are on gear often are walking around with like 160 on 100 blood pressure chronically. That is going to put so much stress on the heart, because it is pumping again against a very high resistance compared to like 120 over 80. That's pressure overload, and that is how you start to get an increased hypertrophy of the left ventricle. It's just like a vicious cycle. All of these things you need to look at. There are many vectors, but blood pressure is one of the most important. If it is high, there are active steps we can do to lower it, pretty much like 20 to 30 points systolic. We need to get that data first, It doesn't mean that you need to give up the bodybuilding lifestyle. It just means that you need to be really, really strict on your blood pressure. Even 10 points over chronically has a very much higher risk of heart disease and heart attack as compared to being perfect, 120 on 80 optimal blood pressure. Know where it is, get it checked, have a blood pressure monitor at home. When you're relaxed, do it. You're in this industry, it is so important to be safe and healthy, because unless you don't care about it, which I assume 99% of you do, it's so important to keep safe and healthy, because let's be honest, top bodybuilding at the top level is not healthy. It's just not. But if you take these steps, you can make it healthier. Basically, if you've learned nothing else from this video, just remember that living a safe and healthy life in bodybuilding is not dying of a heart attack. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any more questions, just drop them down in the comments. I'm more than happy to share them with you. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see. Fitness doc. Well, I was fitness science. Now I'm the fitness doc, because I just think it's more appealing, a bit more representative of where I'm taking my career and where I want to be. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you in the next video.